My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm our executive director for the Veale Institute of Entrepreneurship here at Case Western Reserve University. And I'm also a professor of entrepreneurship here at the Weatherhead School of Management. I'm on campus right now. And it's great to welcome Brad Silverberg, virtually at least, back to Cleveland. We connected a number of years ago, and we were actually just talking Cleveland Browns. I'm glad. It is interesting, Brad, how many former Clevelanders that sort of grew up and kind of, became our Cleveland sports fans have stayed Cleveland sports. I think we still have like the biggest Browns backers club like network in the world of people that are out in the diaspora. So
it's a character builder growing up in Cleveland and being a Cleveland sports fan.
No doubt.
Those character.
No doubt. Yeah, it's funny when I watch younger people sort of like, oh, we'll just choose a different team if our team's not good. It's like, no, when you're a Cleveland sports fan, you get married to this stuff and you stick with it. So it's great to have you here today. Our great student Aranya Kumar is going to moderate the discussion. Aranya you're a CS and you're a double major, right? CS and
CS and physics.
Physics, nice. And Aranya was a participant this summer in we did kind of an emergency entrepreneurship internship program. And Aranya worked with Ricky Graham, who's one of our entrepreneurs on campus. So I was glad to see you get that experience. And for those that are joining on LinkedIn, if you have questions for Brad during the session, just put them in the comment box on LinkedIn. And Doug and I will sort of be monitoring and get them over. And for those that are joining here on Zoom, we want this to be very interactive. So just let Aranya know if you have a question that you want to ask Brad. So Brad, thank you so much for doing this. And we're excited about today's discussion.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Being patient. I know it's taken a while to arrange, but I'm glad we got it set up.
All right. So if we want to get this kicked off, like I said, I'm Aranya Kumar. I'm computer science and physics major. I'm a third year here at Case. And if you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. I'll call on you. Unmute yourself, quick introduction, name, maybe major, and your question. And if you can't unmute yourself, use the chat box and I can read your question out loud. To get us kicked off, a little introduction. Brad was the senior vice president of Microsoft, and he was the head of the team that basically just started Windows. So first question, where did you go to university and what degree did you get?
Okay, let me give you a little background. So I grew up in Cleveland, proud Cleveland native. I went to public school in Beechwood, graduated Beechwood High School in 1972. And growing up in Cleveland, I would say, I don't know how many people on the call are from Cleveland, or like Aranya, you said you're from Michigan and you're in Cleveland. But growing up in Cleveland, particularly in the late 60s, early 70s, was a special time. It was not necessarily Cleveland's best years. In the 50s, Cleveland was really a powerhouse in the country. I think it was the 7th largest city in the country at one point. There were more Fortune 500 companies had headquarters in Cleveland than any city outside of New York. And so the 40s and 50s were great booming years for Cleveland. The 60s and 70s, not so much. It was kind of the start of the industrial decline. The years I was growing up, there were a lot of smokestacks spewing a lot of stuff into the air, and busy car plants, and it was very, a bustling blue collar city that was really starting to show the beginning of decline. This is when the river caught fire. People may have heard about. There was a lot of racial tension in the city. It was a very segregated city by ethnic background. The people of Cleveland, are great people. I think they're really salt of the earth, hardworking, good people. But there was a lot of racial tension, a lot of ethnic segregation. When you found out what area somebody lived in, you kind of knew a little bit about their background. You knew oh, they were Polish or they were Jewish or they were a WASP or something. You were pretty well defined by the neighborhood you lived in. And we had the racial riots in the 60s, and that was painful, but very well understood when you look at how our African American neighbors were being treated. And so it really did shape my character a lot. I really learned a lot about America. I learned about the good parts. I learned about parts that really needed to be changed. And I was pretty politically active in my high school years. That was during the Vietnam War years too. And so when I graduated high school, my desire was to be a lawyer and kind of address some of the social issues that was facing the country. I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, with the intention of becoming a lawyer. And my freshman year, I signed up for a typical pre-law slate of classes, including history, political science, so on. And just as a last second, I can't really explain it. I crossed off Linguistics 101 and I wrote in AM 51 on my course schedule. I was always interested in languages. I was signing up for a linguistics class. I had no exposure to computers at all in high school. This is early 70s. And I saw there was a class. I looked over the shoulder, a person in front of me in a registrar's line, and he was signing up for AM 51. And I didn't even know what department AM stood for. So I had to pull out the big course catalog. And so it was Applied Mathematics 51, Introduction to Computer Languages. I didn't even know computers had languages. It was like, well, what does that mean? I had no idea what that meant. I thought, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. The whole notion that computers have languages. I like languages. So I crossed off linguistics. I wrote in computer languages. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I fell in love with it. I struggled with it the first couple months. I really felt like I was failing, but I'm also pretty stubborn and didn't want to give up. So, but then one Saturday evening, sitting around with some friends, I just kind of like light bulb went off, and I really understood how these things worked, and I kind of fell in love with it. So I continued to take some computer classes while I was still ostensibly pre-law, but then ultimately I realized, my real passion was behind this computer stuff. So I switched majors sophomore year to computer science. I had no idea at that point what I would ever do with computer science. This was the days of IBM and digital equipment company, Data General, and I had no idea what I would do with it as a career, but I just knew I loved the experience of computer science and being able to create stuff in your mind and then put it on the computer. So I ended up majoring in computer science, and I moved to, when I graduated, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. This was mid 70s. And so I did what a lot of students back then who had no idea or weren't ready to be a grown up and go into the workforce did. And I went to grad school. Basically kicked the can down the road a little bit so I could stay in academia. I got a master's degree in computer science. And then this was just when Silicon Valley was getting started, when all the seminal work at Xerox PARC, which basically invented all of computing as we know it today, was happening. And I fell in love with that. So I moved to Silicon Valley in 1978. And I was very lucky to be at the right place at the right time with the right set of skills. And it felt like, well, being originally a history major, it felt like I was at the beginning of the French Revolution. And we were storming the barricades, creating this new world around technology. And I was in nerd heaven. It was Silicon Valley in the late 70s, early 80s it was nerd heaven, and I was finally with my people, and it was awesome. And so I continued down that path. I ended up at Microsoft. I did I started at Stanford Research Institute because I wasn't quite ready to leave full academia and join the real world. So I viewed that as kind of a halfway house between the two. But then the Valley was really just exploding with new companies and great ideas. And I wanted to go off and build stuff instead of do research. So I joined Apple. I worked at Apple in the early 80s, and then I did a startup. That startup was acquired by Borland. I worked for Borland. Then I was recruited by Microsoft to run the Windows group just as Windows 3.0 was launched. And then I was in charge of Windows from that point up through the launch of Windows 95. So I was a person behind Windows 95, both the business side and the product side. While I was doing that, I also saw what I believed was the next technology wave that was going to shape our industry, and that was the internet. So I was one of the early executives of Microsoft that really embraced the internet and tried to push the company quickly to rally around the internet. That had mixed success. There were aspects where we succeeded, but after we succeeded, the company pretty well retrenched back behind being a Windows first company instead of an internet first company. And so I left the company in 1999. I started a venture capital firm. And then 7 years ago, I started another venture capital firm, and now I'm retired. So that's a quick background. But I bring up that part about changing to that Applied Mathematics 51 course as an example, because I think it gives you a real key to my life and my philosophy, which is to always be curious and always embrace serendipity. The fact that I took this AM51 course was really pretty random. I mean, I had no idea what computer languages were, and I had no idea even what it could mean. It just seemed so weird to me. Computers have languages? Well, they don't talk. But I was curious about it. I thought, oh, well, yeah, okay, sure, I'll try that. And so there's been a number of times through my career, I've continued to try to stay curious and be ready to embrace serendipity. That usually if you have a plan for your life, it doesn't really work out that way. And you have to be ready to make decisions along the way it's not a straight line to success. And you have to be willing to experiment, to take some risks, take some setbacks, to learn about yourself and learn about what you do well and what you don't do well, and embrace that. I mean, I learned, in high school, I thought I was pretty smart. I went to college and realized, well, I'm pretty reasonably smart, but I'm not really that smart. There are a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me. And I got to Apple and Microsoft. I realized, I'm okay, but there are a lot of really smarter people than I am. So I had to learn to broaden my skill set. If I wanted to be successful, I wasn't ever going to be a great programmer. I was a good programmer, but I was never going to be even in the league of some of the people that I worked with. So I had to learn to develop other skills. I had to learn to develop some leadership skills. I had to learn to develop managerial skills. I had to learn to appreciate the dynamics of building great products. And that's more than just IQ. It's a blend of skills, and certainly my liberal arts background helped me with that. I understood a lot of people interactions and psychology and stuff. And I learned some of that the hard way too. I made a lot of mistakes early, and you have to continue to embrace that kind of growth mindset and learn to get criticism and learn from your mistakes, and find out what you're best at. That was a long answer to one question. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it was a great background.
Covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Ground there.
So I guess I'll just kind of see if there's any other questions open.
Go ahead, Aranya. Why don't you ask the first couple, and then this is good warning to those on Zoom and on LinkedIn Live that we'll let Aranya ask the first few, and then we want to hear your questions. So go ahead, Aranya.
All right. So I know you touched on this a little bit, but you did get a pretty technical degree. And I guess maybe a lot of people watching this do have a path towards like a technical degree. How do you think the business environment, because I know you deal with both business and tech,
right,
in the field that you were in. So how do you think that the business environment is different? And is there like transferable skills that are, that you used from your degree?
Sure. What I found, so I'm just talking tech. I can't really speak to, automobile manufacturing or consumer product goods or banking. I can really only speak to stuff I had in my own experience. As we spoke, a while ago. We talked about, if you want to go into investment banking, well, an MBA is table stakes. You have to have it, and but to go into tech, an MBA is not required. And I didn't have an MBA. I learned the business stuff just as I needed to. But I will say the most successful business people in tech have a tech background. You may have an undergraduate degree in tech, in physics or chemistry or computer science or some STEM, but you have a good sense for business. Maybe you get an MBA, you go out into the business world. I know very, very few really successful CEOs or top executives that don't have a very strong tech background. And if there are, they mostly come from more of a sales background. And then if their CEO is probably more of a later stage company where at that point, a sales background, it's more of a sales-led culture than a tech or product-based culture. But if you look at, you just look at the Satya Nadella, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, you just go down, Bill Gates, just go down the list. They all have strong tech backgrounds, and I think that's really important. I think it's really important to understand products and have a good sense of feel for products, but then also be able to blend the human side, be able to understand how do products connect to people. Even very technical products, they still have an elegance, they have something there that resonates, whether in the developer's soul or the end user's soul. There's an art to it. It's not just a science, and learning to develop and understand the art side of it. And then obviously learning to be a leader and learning to become a good manager. There's not a formula for that. You can't those aren't Maxwell's equations. Those are things you just have to learn. Sometimes you have it growing up, and sometimes you learn it in experience. What you learn, when you're in college, when you're in grad school, you think being smart is really the most important thing. But at most good tech companies, smart is really just table stakes. Yeah, sure, some people are smarter than others, but really what determines long-term success is character. And a big part of character is learning to develop trust, learning to receive trust, learning to listen, learning to bring teams together, learning how to develop people and mentor people, learning how to get the most out of people and build teamwork. We see this. I think sports analogies, I know you're not that much into sports, but I think sports analogies are valuable here because you see it time and time again. It isn't always the team that has the best players that win. It's the team that they learn how to trust each other and complement each other and work together the most as a team. Sure, there's a certain level of skill you have to be competitive, but what really sets champions apart from second place is teamwork and character. And you learn, if you want to get far in your career, you can't do it just yourself. You have to do it with a team. And so yeah, those are some of the most important lessons I've learned. And I did start out fairly selfish. They were hard lessons for me to learn. But when you have a big vision, as I did when I came to Microsoft, thinking about what Windows. When I came to Microsoft, this was just as Windows 3 was being launched, but I had Windows 95 in my head at that point, and I knew I wanted to build that, and I knew we had an incredibly talented team, And if I could get them passionate about what that goal would be, then we could do some pretty incredible things. And we did. And it was incredibly satisfying to see your product, have such a effect on the world and be, I traveled the world during the launch, and you see people all over the world of all different shapes and sizes and colors using the product you just spent 3 years working 100-hour weeks to build. It was incredibly gratifying. It was the 25th anniversary this summer of Windows 95, and we all feel very, very proud of the role we played, and more than that, the lifelong friendships that we built. That when you go through a project like that with that much pressure, with the stakes so high, with that much worldwide visibility, and it turns out so well, you create lifelong friendships. You reveal who people's characters really are. You put people under pressure, and you find out what they're really made out of. And in the right environment, you bring out the best in people, and you see that happen. You know when you're in a good environment, when it makes you want to subordinate your own short-term personal goals to the long-term goals of the team and the vision. And when you find people acting selfishly and short-term, to me, that's a real warning sign that of a bad culture, that people don't believe in being fairly rewarded for their hard work. They don't believe in the mission of the company. So then they think me first. And to me, that's a bad sign. And a good sign is when you see people, do whatever it takes for the group's goals to be successful. And then they have trust that they'll be recognized and rewarded for that. And trust is a two-way street. Trust is not just you trust your managers or your managers trust you, it's both. And when that trust happens, when people trust that they'll be able to give of themselves freely, commit themselves totally to that group's common goal, and they'll be recognized and rewarded for it fairly, then people will do amazing things. You kind of unlock a potential in people, and that human potential is, it's not just equations. It's not just stuff you can learn in math textbooks. It's the stuff you learn from studying history and political science too. It's learning how to motivate people. And that's probably the biggest lesson of my career.
Yeah, going back to your embracing serendipity, we had a question from the LinkedIn Live. I'm sorry if I butcher your name, but Downing Zhu asked, can you speak more about what you mean by embracing serendipity, and how do you generate serendipity?
Well, I think the example I gave was, being curious. It starts with being curious and being open-minded. I was locked into Linguistics 101, and I didn't even know what Department AM stood for. I was into political science or history or linguistics or German. I had no idea. I had applied mathematics. What does even applied mathematics mean? What does computer languages mean? But I said, okay, sure, I'll try it. It's learning. It's about putting yourself out there in uncomfortable positions sometimes, stretching your comfort zone, not always taking that safe, comfortable path that is going to result in probably a pretty good outcome, but always questioning, always keeping yourself open to new ideas, new experiences. And that when the right one hits, be ready to take advantage of it, to then be decisive. So one is being curious, and the other aspect is being decisive. That when, people describe luck sometimes as opportunity meets preparation. That's what luck is. And in many cases, that's true. You have to, when the opportunity hits, you want to take full advantage of it, but there are things you can do to open yourselves up to being available for that opportunity. Some of it is networking. Some of it is curiosity. Some of it is is embracing new opportunities. Some of it is taking jobs outside your comfort zone because this is an area you want to learn about, but you don't really know. And you're worried, well, if I take that job, maybe I'll go off track on my career plan. But, I think that's an appropriate thing to do. The founder of Carlyle Capital, and I forget his name right now.
David Rubenstein.
Wrote a book. That's right, David Rubenstein. Wrote a book recently that essentially said, embrace. Some of the most successful people were not successful earlier in their careers, that they had to go through many different steps, bounce around from different types of jobs to other types of jobs to really discover what they are best at and to discover their inner talents and to round themselves out well. Some large companies back in the day used to, as part of career development, move people from geography to geography, from job to job, to help build out their experience base and see different types of jobs. Even the best tech execs are well served to work in sales or to work in marketing for a while. And so you embrace those types of experiences, and then you open yourself up to new opportunities and to that serendipity. The same thing happened to me again with Microsoft. When I was at Borland, we were primarily known for developer tools like Turbo Pascal, Turbo C, Delphi. We were probably one of the top development tool companies. We had incredible staff of developers, some people I'm still very close with 35 years later. And when Microsoft, we were big competitors with Microsoft. We tended to beat Microsoft in many of the technology competitions, or developers liked our tools better. And it really bothered Bill and Steve that this little company down in Santa Cruz was kicking their butt. So they recruited me to go work at the company. They actually recruited me in 1989 to run part of the applications group. I ended up turning them down after 6 months worth of negotiations because my heart was still at Borland. But some things changed at Borland that I wasn't very happy with. So I thought about calling Bill and Steve back in late 1989. And at that point, most of you are too young to remember some of this history, but Microsoft's operating system strategy, platform strategy at that point was OS2, was an operating system that was being jointly developed by IBM. I wasn't very impressed with OS2 as a product. I didn't really care for it. I didn't really like the fact that it was being co-developed by IBM. It really felt very heavyweight and not really my idea of what a consumer-oriented operating system should be at that point. So when I called Bill back in November of 1989, and I asked him, okay, I think I've changed my mind. I might be ready to come to Microsoft. What do you have for me? And he said, well, I could put you in charge of the Windows group. We're going to be launching Windows 3.0 in May, and I can put you in charge of that group. And I had been a beta tester of Windows 3 at Microsoft, or at Borland, and I was impressed with it. I thought, oh, this one looks like it could be successful. And I really didn't think much of OS2, even though that was the company's strategy. So when Bill said, we'll put you in charge of Windows 3.0, I thought, okay, this is it. This is the one I'll say yes to. So I continued to stay curious. I embraced that opportunity when he gave it to me. I moved my family up from the Bay Area to Seattle, and I started right after Windows 3.0 launched. Bill wanted to wait to announce my coming to Microsoft till after CHIP because he didn't want to disrupt the guy who was the head of the team and everything. So I started it in May, And within my first month, I was at a retreat at Veale. Veale has a compound on Puget Sound on the Hood Canal. It was a small group, maybe 10 of the top executives in the company. It was at that meeting we decided to divorce IBM. And I thought, oh shit! Like, I went from Plan B. We went from Windows was a huge success, but it was still Plan B at that point. And now, here I am, head of the group that is at the very center of the company's strategy, and that opened up an incredible amount of opportunity for me. When I went from Borland to Microsoft, it was like being called up from AAA ball till now batting fourth on the New York Yankees. It was everything was just bigger, better. The team around me was so much better. The organization was so much better run. And, here I was at the center of the world's greatest opportunity in tech, and took full advantage of it. So it was uncomfortable. It was a very uncomfortable moment for me to leave my friends and my friend, my colleagues, the company I loved at Borland, but I put myself out there and I braced that serendipity that Windows became Plan A. Windows became the center of the technology universe, not OS2. And so again, I was at the right time, at the right place, with the right skills. And you have to be ready to take those chances, and you have to be ready to accept that, it might not work out. And you know what? The sun's still going to come up. It's still going to be okay. Keep your family close, your friends close, and do the best you can. If it doesn't work, be resilient.
No, Brad, this is going so well until you mentioned the Yankees analogy, and you talked about Albert Bell or some Indian analogy.
Yeah, well, we all have Alex Rodriguez or Randy Johnson, but when you're on the Yankees, you just have a sense, or you have a sense you're going to win.
That is true.
You have a sense you're going to win, and how your role in life is different than being on the Seattle Mariners right now, where you used to have a sense you're going to lose. I mean, Seattle Seahawks have that same thing. They just have a sense they're going to win. 2 minutes left. Russell's got the ball. They're going to win. And that's a cultural thing. It's a belief in your teammates. It's a belief in your coaching. It's a belief that we're going to find a way to get it done. And you see team after. When you look at the Atlanta Falcons, would they have a 20-point lead in the Super Bowl in the third quarter, and they blow it against the Patriots, who have a sense that, hey, we're going to win. We're going to win. And it's very real. It's real in the marketplace too. It's not just true in sports. It's true in the marketplace. When you have good leaders, you have good managers, you have good players or good teammates, you believe in your mission, you believe in each other, you trust each other. People are capable of doing things you never thought they were capable of. And that was true on my Windows team. We were Plan B, and in general, the more talented developers were on the OS2 project. That was the cream of the crop. They were the Yankees. We were the Indians.
Going to that business ecosystem, Esther had a question. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Sure. Thank you. My question is, Mr. Silverberg, how do you see today's business ecosystem compared to 25 years ago when you launched Windows 95? And as a follow-up to that, how do you see the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think it's quite different today, because in the early 90s, things were new, and the new world was just being formed. Everything was up for grabs. There was a transition from DOS and character-oriented user interfaces to smaller, high-performance PCs with a graphical user interface. And everything was up for grabs. There was Macintosh, there was OS2, which IBM continued to develop. There were other DR-DOS and GEM, and it was unclear how it was all going to play out. And It was incredibly scary, high risk, high stake times. And we were making it all up as we went along. We were young, we were inexperienced, we made a lot of mistakes, and it wasn't clear how it was going to play out. In retrospect, you look back and you say, oh yeah, it was obvious. It was all preordained, but I can promise you, you see all the hair that's not there anymore? I can promise you that in 1990 through 1995, it was not preordained. It was not deterministic. It was every day was a battle for who's going to win. We were lucky in that they were. Our philosophy at Microsoft was really a market share based one. We believed in democratization of computing. We wanted everybody. I mean, the Microsoft motto at that point, the vision was a PC on every desktop running Microsoft software. We wanted everybody around the world at all income levels and experience and so on using PCs. And that contrasted very directly with, say, Apple's. Apple's was high priced and they only wanted, white collar knowledge workers, the elite, the cool people with black turtlenecks to use their computers. And they had a very elitist attitude about their products, which we took full advantage of. I mean, we wanted everybody to be able to use computers at much lower prices. And so we felt we had a much stronger strategy. We had excellent execution. It was an extraordinarily well-run company, not just from the technical side, but John Shirley running the operational side was an operational genius. And I mean, I really did feel like these are the best and brightest people in the world. And if we execute well, we'll win, but you don't know. Whereas today, it's we're pretty settled into a Google, Facebook, Apple, Amazon world. It's pretty settled in. There isn't a huge amount of innovation happening. I mean, back then there was so much innovation happening every day. First it was the PC, and then Windows, and then the internet, and the browser, and server-based computing. Every day there was incredible new innovation happening. And today we're not really in a state of that much innovation. It's more settling in, taking advantage of cloud. So there's a lot of competition between Microsoft and Amazon and Google in cloud. There's some competition between Apple and Google, but the iPhone 12 versus the iPhone 11 versus the iPhone 10, that's just tweaks, very, very minor tweaks. And they seem to have very settled positions. Either, Facebook, TikTok has come up as a new social network, but it's not like, it seems like the world order is pretty well settled, maybe some changes on the edges. So something has to happen for that world order to change. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I think Facebook has done a good job, if you're Facebook, of making acquisitions, whether it's WhatsApp or Instagram, so that as potential competitors have emerged, they've acquired them, absorbed them into the empire. So I think the next 5 years, I think, are probably going to be dominated more on the political side than they are going to be on the technical innovation side, let's say. I think we're in the stage of, okay, all this cloud and mobile stuff is going to sweep through our industries and be applied to one mainline industry after another to modernize it. Most of the way these companies are still run today is still pretty backwards. And so we're going to see kind of the technology adoption side that's going to have some impact on companies. But I think, there's some, Justice Department just filed an antitrust suit against Google. I think we're going to see a lot more of that stuff that questions how big technology companies should be and how much control they should have over the economy. I think that's going to probably be more the focus in the next 5 years than actual technology innovation.
Bob said that
does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
So Bob said he had a comment, quick introduction.
Hi,
Sure.
Brian. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Another BS. So, Sherry, a little bit of history, because you brought up Borland. So I was with the largest drugstore chain in the country in the Cleveland area at the time. And I was in marketing, but worked extensively with IT. IT had like a 2.5-year backlog. And to get anything out of them, I was taking some flat files using JCL, driving it into Lotus, and then using Paradox,
Yeah,
Borland Paradox,
that's
to
right.
do
It's an incredible product.
I could make it sing, and it was just amazing, the product. And oh yeah, you guys, and Quattro,
Quattro, yeah, Quattro,
Yep.
Quattro Pro.
Quattro Pro, yeah, it was just
Yeah.
an amazing product. And when you guys kind of like had to kind of like merge up and dissipate they picked it apart. I don't know what all happened to everything, but it was just kind of an interesting. I've not heard Borland
Yeah.
for like ever. And when you're talking about planning, I challenge anybody who had a 5-year plan and had this in 2020. There's one guy who there's one guy who may have had it, and that's your old boss, Bill Gates, right? Because he was saying that
he
the
did.
pandemic. So
Well, Bill he did have it. And Bill's an incredible person.
yeah, he's really done well with his persona out there, and he seems like a cool guy. I'm not a big fan of the guy who owns a basketball team. And that cork got unlocked when he was no longer there, Ballmer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I also worked for a company in town here called Overdrive, and they were working with Melinda before she was a Gates, and they do ebooks.
Melinda French.
Yeah, Melinda French, correct. And they do ebooks. They do the back end. Libby is their product, and they were working with Microsoft on some. Microsoft put $5 million into them, and then they sold to Rankatoon for $420 million. But that's a Cleveland-based company. They've got about 100 and some employees. Rankatoon bought them for $420 million, and now KKR owns them. But they were working with Melinda when she was in Texas. I believe she was in Texas for a while.
Yeah, she grew up in Texas.
Yep.
She's from Dallas area.
Yeah. And then, sorry, all you other folks, I'm reminiscing. You were there when Herbold was there?
I was, yes.
Okay, because
he was from P&G.
Yeah, Case grad. So
he's a Case grad. Okay.
PhD. He gave us a fair amount of money for big data. So wrote the book about fiefdoms. Pretty cool guy. And were you in the meeting with him when Steve Jobs came looking for 150 million bucks?
I wasn't in that particular. I was me and Greg Maffei, who was our CFO at the time, spearheaded that deal between us and Steve Jobs. And but when the deal was actually signed, I was on sabbatical. So Greg called. I was on my bicycle in Glacier National Park in Montana, eating a huckleberry pie when he called me up and said, "Okay, we signed the deal. We're going to have the announcement next week or something." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to be able to be there," but he said, "That's fine."
Yeah, Apple wouldn't be Apple without.
They wouldn't exist. Well, the background, it's interesting. The background of that deal is not very well understood.
It was
really, not really. There was an aspect to it. There was an aspect to it that was antitrust, but it really started as patent lawsuit. So Apple came to us because they lost the copyright trial versus Windows. They sued Microsoft over copyright, and it went to trial. They lost, and there was always a lot of animosity at Apple towards Microsoft, even though we were their best ISV with Microsoft Office for Mac. So they came to me, demanding $1 billion in payments for patents. And we said, well, we're not going to pay you $1 billion. I mean, go take a hike.
Yeah.
Like, we don't think we're infringing. We're not going to pay. And they said, well, we're going to sue you. We're going to sue you over patents. And so eventually then, well, I was in charge of Office at the time. And Mac Office, people thought Mac Office was super successful and making a lot of money, but in like the 96, 97 timeframe, that wasn't really true. It was, the Macintosh was in a tailspin. This is after Windows 95 came out.
Oh, yeah.
And the Mac was in a tailspin, and Gil Amelio, who was the CEO at the time, was accelerating the tailspin, and the company was really on the path to oblivion. And I was in charge of Mac Office, including Mac Office. And I may have the numbers slightly wrong, but I think 25% of my dev team was on Mac Office, which accounted for 3% of overall Office revenues. So at that point, it didn't make business sense to continue to invest in Mac Office. We were doing it mostly for Apple's sake, to support the company and be a good citizen, but it didn't really make business sense. It was kind of, and especially when Apple's operating system strategy then was so unclear, very few people were committing to doing new versions of Mac software, including Adobe, who was, along with Microsoft, the top two ISVs. Adobe announced they weren't gonna, they put new versions of their Mac software on hold. So when they came to us and said, well, we're going to sue you for $1 billion, I responded, well, maybe we're not going to do more versions of Mac Office. Like, if you're going to sue us, it's like, I guess the gloves are off. It's like,
interesting.
well, we're doing it to you as a favor. And if you're going to go to war with us, well, I guess we're not going to be such nice guys about it.
Interesting.
And they panicked. Well, you have to. You owe it to us. You owe it to us to develop Mac Office. I said, well, you're suing us.
Wow.
I guess I don't owe you anything anymore. And they panicked. And then Steve came back. That's when they bought Next. And Steve became CEO. And we were able to have conversations with Steve and said, okay, let's put this all to bed. Okay, we'll do a patent cross license. We'll commit to doing new versions of Mac Office. We'll give you $150 million. You'll adopt Internet Explorer for the Mac, which was also I was in charge of. And we'll have a big announcement. And so that's how that all came about. But it all started with a threat of a patent lawsuit and our counter threat to stop developing Mac Office.
Yeah.
But that shaped Steve Jobs' view about software for the rest of his life. On the iPhone. He wanted to make sure that no software company would ever be in a position that it could hold Apple hostage again. And that's why the App Store is set up the way it is, so that companies can do okay, but they'll never make a huge amount of money. They'll never have that much sway over Apple, because he never wanted to be in that position where another company could threaten Apple the way we did in response to their threat to us.
Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off or anything,
history.
but we are running out of time. So I know Michael has a couple things that he wants to announce after this, but thank you so much, Brad, for answering all these questions. And if you are still curious, you can reach out to Brad on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And Bob, thanks for the memory lane and engaging. And Bob, Brad is one of our great partners here on campus, helping students with their startup ideas through LaunchNet. Brad, this was great. I know the sort of Cleveland, this is once and always your home, and you still have family here, and it's great to be able to connect with you here. And post-COVID, we do look forward at some point to welcoming you back to Cleveland, and would love to get you on campus and engage with you around some of the things that we're doing here. But we really do appreciate you taking the time today. This is great.